Welcome. We are super excited to have you all today. And we are super excited to have Christian joining us today. I know many of you have been so excited and anticipating this. So yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I just need to see a little technical thing real quick that I just thought of.
So that we're the only ones here though right now. So I don't know if it says we're streaming live on Facebook, but we're the only ones here. So hi.
Yeah, it's just us. We're just hanging out. We're just friends hanging out who are streaming live to potentially 35,000 people. So amazing. We're going to dive right in, Christian, because we've given people all kinds of homework, and we know that everybody in this group always does every assignment that we give them. So they've heard your story. Many people have read your book, seen your TEDx talk. So we want to sort of ask questions that are not there. And I just want to start with a question that has been really interesting to think about, because we've been really fortunate over the last almost 3 months. We're 90 days. We're 6 days away from being 90 days old. And
we got to do a celebration.
Congratulations.
Yeah, some kind of celebration. Yeah. And we've been here every single day. And we know that yourself and many others have been here every single day for this work for many, 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 many years. So I just wanted to ask you, how does it feel to right now have people kind of waking up?
That's a good question. First of all, congratulations. That's a big feat to have, 35,000 people who are going to be celebrating that timeline. That's amazing. It's interesting. That's a good question. Sometimes I feel like I'm not sure people are waking up. And some days I feel like, the momentum is starting to finally happen. Somebody said to me just yesterday, it's easy to wake up somebody who's sleeping. It's impossible to wake up somebody who's pretending to sleep.
Oh.
And I thought that was really, really deep. But I think people can kind of take that however they want. But to me, that kind of means that, if somebody's truly lost, if they are truly completely lost, they can find their way back. Wow. It's the ones who really fail to admit that they're lost, that they're kind of down a bad path, that it's impossible to kind of help them unless they see that. So that's kind of the way I took that, and it was a really kind of a deep, powerful thing to me. I've been doing this work for about 20 years now, after having been involved in the white supremacist movement, 30 years ago, and spending almost 10 years there. But I do feel like we are at a moment in our time on Earth where people are starting to finally move in the direction of getting it. I think we'd fool ourselves by saying we get it, right? Like we still don't get it. Like we're still trying to figure out this very complicated, complex thing that for 400 years, at least in our country, we've kind of ignored. But I think that we are at a critical moment that I do believe is an important learning moment, and I fear that if we don't treat it as a learning moment, it will be just another moment that is swept under the rug that is going to be so damaging to us, to our people, to everybody, to just our democracy in general, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of this learning moment, what do you think it is it is for us to learn here?
Well, I think, for white people, I think we have to learn that we've been keeping our eyes closed for so long to a problem that has existed. And that while we've been okay with kind of very incrementally making progress along the way, we haven't really given of ourselves enough to make that full transformation, right? So and I assume I'm speaking to a group of mostly white people, if the Facebook group was called White People Doing Something. This is the moment where we can't. This is the moment where we can't really be bystanders anymore, right? This is the moment where we have to choose to be anti-racist, because if we don't choose to act on that, if we don't, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and we can talk about that too. But if we don't choose to act now, history will not be kind to our not paying attention to this moment, and our fellow humans need us. right? So it is time where, where we must act to be anti-racist. And it's not enough to just say, I'm not racist, I don't participate in the bad things, so that's good enough. That is not good enough. We must participate in the good things. We must, risk our voices and our privilege to reach out our hands to our fellow humans and say, hey, we're with you right now.
I know when we started this group, you, of course, were one of the first people that we reached out to when we realized that it wasn't maybe just going to be 1,000 of our closest friends in this group altogether, but 35,000 of our closest friends altogether in this group. And you were pretty busy. What was happening for you in the days following George Floyd? And I know you're pretty busy every single day, but it seemed like you might be a little extra pretty busy in the wake of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much happening right now at the same time that, it's kind of a perfect storm of uncertainty in many ways. And uncertainty is what drives a lot of the work that I do. So, we're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with, protests surrounding police brutality and the senseless murder, continued murder of people of color. And this is a prime opportunity for white supremacists to be kicked into high gear, right? This is a propaganda moment for them because of this uncertainty, because of this anger, this frustration that's bubbling up. So what I deal with in times like this is an elevated number of requests for help, typically from family members of people they're concerned about, whether it's a son or a daughter or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a coworker that is a white supremacist. Suddenly people are like, okay, well, I can't be complacent anymore. I have to do something. I have to intervene with this person. I just don't know how to do that. So they'll reach out to me and say, how do I, what do I say? How do I confront them? How do I talk about this? And that typically goes up in moments like this. Because people want to do something. And I also get, interestingly enough, requests from white supremacists during these moments who want to get out because they see that they're part of something that maybe they didn't bargain for to begin with. It turned into something else that kind of spiraled out of control, and they don't know how to disengage from it. They may have found their way, not because of the ideology, they may have found their way there because of group acceptance or their friends were a part of it. And all of a sudden they're caught up in something that they don't see an exit from, and they really are very interested in finding a way out to. Not to mention all the threats and all the trolling that happens during these moments too, that's elevated. Of course, but yeah, it's a time I think when people's minds are in overdrive. Uncertainty, I keep going back to that word, drives so much of extremist behavior and just toxic behavior in general, because people are kind of, trying things outside of the box to get past whatever, grievances, whatever trauma, whatever things have happened in their lives, and extremists are really, really good at exploiting these situations to look for vulnerable people too. So yeah, uncertainty drives a lot of this.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that when somebody reaches out, probably it depends on the situation, but is there sort of when a family member reaches out and they say like, hey, I don't know how to start a conversation with this person. Is there, I mean, what's sort of it's in almost every single email that you send out. Like, it's like, do this, don't do that. Like, what would you say? Because I'm sure we have people in this group who have family members who they, want to have a conversation with. So
do more listening and a lot less debating. Arguing, I can tell you, Molly and Asia, never in the hundreds of times I've worked with people to help them disengage from hate groups, never has it worked for me to argue with them, to debate them, to tell them that they're wrong. I know that they're wrong. I was there, trust me, I've seen that side of the world, and I never want to go back. So I know that they're wrong. I mean, maybe more than most, I know how despicable, what they do is. But it doesn't help to shame them back into that place. People certainly need to be held accountable. I'm not saying that like we should be nice to bad people for the sake of being nice to bad people, right? People need to be held accountable for what they do. And I hold every single person accountable that I work with, including myself. I've been doing that for 20 years. But what I also know is that if you shame somebody, if you attack them, a defense mechanism is a natural instinct. And, you know, what I try to do instead is I listen, and I listen for what I call potholes. And those potholes are metaphorical, obviously. They're the things that appeared in their life's journey that detoured them to that place that they're at, right? So potholes can be trauma, it can be abuse, it can be mental illness, it can be poverty, it can be privilege. Privilege can be a pothole if our privilege keeps us too detached from humanity, right? It can keep us so separate that it detours us to the fringes. And on the fringes, there's all sorts of really negative folks trying to win our attention while we're there, right? Could be Nazis, it could be white nationalists, could be gangs, could be drugs, could be sex trafficking, could be all sorts of really toxic things that are trying to take advantage of vulnerable people who found their way there because of those potholes. But we all have potholes. Not all of us, you know, end up as extremists. So it's kind of this combination of a search for identity, community, and purpose while we're on that journey that leads us sometimes, if we hit those potholes, to these really bad places. And again, we're all searching for identity, community, and purpose. We all want to know who we are, where we belong, and what we're supposed to do with our lives. So it is really about trying to find a balance. When I pull people out, it's not about shaming them. It's about trying to refocus their identity, community, and purpose, and trying to repair their potholes rather than saying their ideology is wrong or you know what they believe is stupid. I know that already. I don't need to tell them that.
You don't need to have that conversation. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the things we talk about in this group all the time, right? We say, you know, are you making the other person wrong? You know, when you make someone wrong, they dig in their heels. You get that backfire effect. I tell you you're wrong, you're going to start telling me you're right, and we're not going to get to have a conversation about what's possible. And so
I say start in the middle, and that's kind of like a controversial phrase, but when I say start in the middle, I mean start with the things that you have in common with that person, right? If they have children, we both want to see our children succeed and be healthy and happy and full of joy and all those things. We need jobs. We want to be healthy. Those are things that just about anywhere on earth you can go and ask somebody if that's important to them, and they'll say, yeah, that's very important to me. Start there. Start the conversations there and find commonality in that. Even find commonality in our universal brokenness. We're all broken. We're all dealing with something that nobody knows about. And maybe find some commonness in that. Eventually we'll go off track, right? Like if you're dealing with somebody who believes differently than you, eventually you'll go off track, but you can find your way back to that middle, to that commonality. But if you start off on the ends with that screaming, with the arguing, with you're wrong and I'm right kind of thing, you never find a way to connect. So it just never works.
Yeah, you're just having a really different conversation on a totally different level. Yeah.
It's funny.
It becomes a competition.
It does become a competition.
And it's not a conversation.
Yeah. And we had somebody, well, we were talking with one of our other guests, Thalia, and she had this really interesting perspective about point of view, right? And how people are so attached to our point of view that like you can't even, it's just like you're at war all the time over a point of view.
Yeah.
And what I find so like interesting about like what you're saying is like meet where you in the middle, right? Like meet where you agree. And it's just interesting because like as a Black person, we're often trying to get people to see us for like that place in the middle, right? Like just the common humanity as opposed to this thing of Blackness that has been created and put upon us and upon you and whiteness, you know? And so it's like, it's so universal, right? That's what I love about this conversation. It's so universal in terms of what it is that you're doing. And it seems so simple, and yet it's something we struggle with so much. And I'm just curious from your perspective and from your experience, why do you think that is, right? And like, what is like maybe like a key kind of framework or thought process that you go through to like be able to meet people in the middle?
I don't know, maybe it's easier for me because I was in their shoes, you know, at one point in my life. So it's I understand their triggers maybe more. And I also know what it was like being of that mindset and being told I was wrong. You know, to your point about like, people don't want to, like, they dig in so much, they don't want to disagree on a point of view because, or they want to disagree on a point of view and stick to their point of view because that's kind of shaped who they are, and admitting that they're wrong kind of denies them of who they are, right?
Mhm.
It's like saying, oh, well, then I'm not really who I thought I was because that point drove me. It was kind of like that for 8 years of my life. Like I went all in into that ideology, and to admit I was wrong, even though I was starting to increasingly know I was scary, because then I was like, I don't even know who I am then anymore, right? Like I know I'm not that, but I don't know who I am. And frankly, if I say I was wrong, the people I was doing that with won't like me, and the people on the outside, they already don't like me. So where am I going to go? So that was scarier to me. That whole idea of starting over and denying kind of who I had been for 8 years of my life and invested so much of my life. And even though I knew I was wrong, it was still really difficult to say I was,
Yeah.
to admit that I was. And if it weren't for the people on the other side, people who were Black, people who were gay, people who were Jewish, who said, you know what, I know you're better than you appear to be, right? There's something about you that I believe in, and I'm willing to say, to accept that you want to be somebody new. Had they said no to me, I would have had no choice but to dig in and go deeper and keep my mouth shut, because internally I wasn't a place where you could be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm starting to like not believe in what we believe in. You didn't do that, right? Like it wasn't that kind of a place. So it would have just been like, well, I'm just going to swallow it whole and just go and deeper. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in, to kind of cancel people out and push them back and not give them an escape route with some sort of a safe place to heal and to be held accountable. Like I said, they must be accountable. There's no free pass. If you hurt people, whether it's verbally, physically, whatever, you are accountable for that. But there is a such thing as a safe place to be able to be accountable and to heal, I believe.
Yeah. And do you really, at your kind of deepest belief, or not, is that like most people, the vast majority of people, can get out of this movement? Has that been your experience?
Again, like yes, I do believe that. I kind of have to believe that, because had people not believed that about me, that I could change, I don't know what would have happened to me, right? And I'm really grateful for that. I also know that there are certain obstacles to people's, quote unquote, recovery, right? If it is, perhaps mental illness that conditioned them throughout their childhood to not, have close relationships with people because they were bullied or because they were picked on because of that, there are certain foundational things that need to be repaired, I believe. Therapists need to be sought out, things like that need to happen for some people who are in these movements, for them to even see that they have a future outside of it, because they're in such a hole historically. And I'm not trying to insinuate that mental illness is making people hate or racist. It's the circumstances around that, the bullying, the not having close relationships and things like that, where they're finding so much comfort from people who are offering them that identity, community, and purpose in these types of movements. So those types of things need to be repaired. Foundational things need to be repaired, I believe, for anybody to be pulled out of these movements. And without that, I believe that they may come back, but they'll eventually go sideways or to some other negative pathway if those potholes aren't repaired. So it is not just about saying, I'm not that anymore, I don't hate anymore. It's about self-reflecting and making sure you've both repaired the damage you've caused for others, but also the damage you've caused for yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I know that, in some of your videos, but I'm curious, like as you, was there like a moment in your life and when you were in this movement, when you were like, did something happen that made you start to be like, this isn't quite right? And then, because it sounds to me like there's seeds of doubt,
like a semblance of
right?
doubt.
And then but something happened to cause that doubt, and then something else happened to allow you to kind of pull that thread, right, until everything can travel. What was that?
there were seeds of doubt every day from the time I was 14 years old and was recruited until I was 23 and I got out. However, in the earlier days, the reward I was getting from being involved was louder than the doubt, right? So I was getting camaraderie. I was suddenly feeling respected when I had felt invisible, and I was bullied before, that. So there were things, I was getting rewards from being in the movement, and it was even overpowering the damage that I was causing. Like I couldn't see the damage because the rewards were still too great for me. It wasn't until that kind of dynamic started to shift that the reward started to become overwhelmed by the damage, right? And that could have been internal damage. It could have been the damage I was causing other people. So those doubts, eventually those seeds grew. But had there not been a way for space for them to grow and an avenue for me to leave, it wouldn't have mattered, because what it would have done is the doubt, if I wouldn't have had a way out after having felt that doubt, the doubt would have just caused me to create more turmoil internally within that group. It would have caused me to find power, in other ways and this and that. So I really do believe that, yes, the doubt has to occur, but there has to also be that kind of escape hatch in tandem with it. Otherwise, it may not work.
Got it. So you said when you were 14 and you were recruited. So you were recruited standing in an alley, right?
Yeah.
And smoking. Someone took it out of your mouth, right? Yeah. Someone took it out of your mouth. That's what they want, right? You want to tell that a little bit, and then I have a question about it. But we did.
Yeah, I was standing. I was, like this kind of bullied kid at 13 and a half, and I've been kind of already acting out a little bit, and I was standing in an alley at 14, and it was 1987, and it was the summer between like 8th grade and freshman year, and I was smoking a joint, and this guy with a shaved head walked up to me, and he pulled a joint from my mouth, and he's like, "Hey kid, that's what the communists and the Jews want you to do to keep you docile." I didn't know what the hell a communist, a Jew, or even what the word docile was at 14 years old, but it was like it was the first time in my life that like somebody had paid attention to me and was like, "Hey, come with me and hang out," kind of thing. And he was old. He was much older. He was like 24, 25 at the time, I think. But yeah, it was kind of this nobody kid who had suddenly been seen for the first time.
Yeah. So today, and we have a question about this, but what does recruitment look like today for this movement? With the, I know that you had talked a lot about in the punk scene, and that's where it was in the past, but what is it like today with this lovely internet?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say the internet has kind of become the digital alley, right? It is, if you're hungry, like a 24-hour all-you-can-eat hate buffet, to where you can serve yourself. You don't need to be standing in that alley anymore and have somebody come up to you. A lot of what I have been seeing the last several years is kind of what I call self-radicalization, where people are kind of starting off on that search for identity, community, and purpose. And if you're thinking of like some lonely 14-year-old kid standing in an alley, think of the millions of lonely teenagers who are online 24 hours a day. Kind of searching for that sense of, friendship and identity and whatnot. And they are being pulled in through really smart propaganda, through algorithms, unintentionally, that social media companies have developed because they want to curate content for us to keep us engaged. But unfortunately, it's curated hate content in many circumstances. Yeah, I mean, it is really scary, to be honest with you, because you had to kind of find it 30 years ago.
Right.
It is very easily finding us today. And the fact that we're all online, we all deal with this kind of fake news and propaganda on a daily basis, whether we recognize it or not, is scary. And as a almost 47-year-old guy who is, I think these days pretty level-headed and logical and rational, I'm struggling with this. I can't imagine what it's like for a 16 or a 15 or a 20-year-old kid who may not have like all the wisdom and, faculties and learned experience that I've had over 47 years. Some people are not stable with this kind of information, and it is really, really, really scary. That is probably the scariest thing. Not to mention that they're recruiting people, especially young, vulnerable people in places like video games, multiplayer video games. If our kids are wearing, headsets, they're talking to somebody who knows where, and sometimes, Eastern Europe or wherever. Their whole goal is to recruit people. I've seen it in autism and depression forums where they're looking for vulnerable young people who are looking for, friends and things like that. It's really kind of despicable the way I've seen it happen.
Yeah, and a lot of young people are looking for friends. That's
what young person isn't it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So somebody did ask, they said, I have a friend who's 15. I believe he's being groomed by white nationalists online, posing as kids in video games. How do you reach out to early teens?
I mean, I wish I could tell you I reach out to them. I don't have the bandwidth to be proactive. There are so many people and parents and families coming to me that I literally can't handle the overwhelming amount of people coming to me. However, generally speaking, how do we reach young people is we have to replace what reward they're finding in those places with something more positive.
Yeah.
Right. Again, they're not searching for that ideology. They're not saying, at 12 years old, like, I can't wait to be 15 and be a hater. Right. What they're saying is, I can't wait to have friends, and I can't wait to have some agency and some meaning and contribute and have a little bit of respect. That's what they're searching for. And sometimes if they're having a hard time finding it in positive places, the negative places are very willing to give that attention to them.
Yeah.
So we just have to do a better job of prevention in the future, of making sure that young people, and frankly, it's not just young people, because old people like my parents' age are also having an identity, community, and purpose crisis. Their friends have died, they're retired, their lives have changed, they're moved, they're now struggling with all like a new life of how to live it, which might explain why we have so many people voting in a certain way or believing conspiracy theories at that age too. We have to do a better job of prevention. We have to take care of people. We have to take care of healthcare. We have to take care of mental health care, education, all the things that we've been talking about we need better access to are all the things that would stop extremism and hate from happening. No joy-filled, happy person says, I can't wait to hate somebody today.
Yeah.
That's it.
It doesn't happen that way.
That's it right there. And it's so that I feel that, because we encounter this like all the time, especially in these conversations. And like sometimes, we spoke to you about like how people will come into our group and it's just like, and like at the end of the day, like when it comes down to it, it's like, who wakes up and is like, I just want to hate today. Like, that's what I want to be about. It just feels so.
You know who does? You know who wakes up and says, I want to hate today? Somebody who hates themselves.
Mm-hmm. Hate people.
Because they want to project that. They want to get rid of it, that weight off of them. I mean, I can't tell you, most of the people, including myself, who were haters, hated other people because they hated themselves so much we couldn't deal with the burden of that hate, that we had to give it to somebody else. And sometimes, for some people, this wasn't the case for me, but for some people who were so low into that hole, the only way that they could feel anything was to hurt other people. They were so damaged themselves that the only way that they could bring any kind of emotion was to elicit that pain. So this is very much this is a thing that if we can solve people's like socioeconomic problems, mental health problems, healthcare problems, all this stuff, we will create a society where and as long as we create understanding as well, we will create a society where we don't need to blame the other for what is wrong in our lives. We will have a clear understanding of how to overcome that stuff ourselves.
And I think that's so interesting and so powerful, because that leads really well into, I think, one of like the tenets, right? It's like, we don't have to blame others. And we think we have all these problems, right? But we really only have one, right? And the problem is in what you just said, the other, and the assumption that there is such a thing.
Yeah, maybe we're all just cells in one body, right? And when we start killing each other off, we're kind of killing ourselves off. We need to start thinking of it that way. Like, we all have a purpose. We all have to communicate. We all have energy with each other. We all have to work in tandem for this body to work. Left wing and right wing, you know, like we have to.
Right,
Yeah,
like, left
arm and
hand
right
doesn't
arm.
work, doesn't work well without the right hand, like
Yeah.
in most situations,
Yeah.
right? Like that's,
But there are these outside influences, like, you know, hate is like a drug. It's addicting to a certain degree. It
Yes.
kills you, and even though you know it does, you still do it. And I think that, you know, this whole idea of like left and right, like this hate that we're talking about on the far right, it was not necessarily something that we talked about before, and we need to understand that this is an outside force that is taking over the whole body and making it do things that it normally wouldn't do. Right? I'm not saying trying to absolve ourselves of the hate our country has had since its very founding, but what I'm saying is hate always pokes its head in when it wants to create chaos, right? When it wants to completely destroy everything. And that's kind of at the moment we're at right now, is we are kind of at a self-destructive moment unless we decide we are going to eliminate the hate.
mm-hmm. So where's your hope in this? Like where's the upside? What do you,
all 35,000 of you watching this right now. I have hope
too, honestly. I think, you know, when we see how people interact in this group versus in some other places, and they say things like, oh, if only the whole internet could be like this. I'm like, it can. Go make it happen. Yeah. You know, like,
here's the thing.
Just showing that it's possible. Yeah.
We all know somebody, right? All 35,000 people here know at least one other person, I would imagine.
Yeah, maybe two.
Maybe two, you know, and we can all affect the people closest to us. This is not like, if we think of it like every single person here has got to go change the world, that is daunting, right? Yeah. If we think about it like, hey, every single person here, the only mission that they have is to try to bridge that gap with one other person, right? Yes. And maybe convince them to go bridge the gap with one other person. Mm-hmm. This is how democracy works. This is how societies work. This is how, you know, at least positive things work. Is we have to work in tandem with each other. So I think we can solve this. I do have hope. This is a moment. Never, you know, maybe we're having sometimes the wrong conversations, but we're having conversations which maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago we weren't having. So that's a start. I also do think that, you know, we understand how dire this moment is, whereas, you know, before we still had people who were like, yay, we live in a post-racial society, things are great. Yeah. I think now we realize that is not the case, and that we still have a lot of work to do, and that if we don't do the work, we may not get another chance to do it. Right. This is kind of it. So we must.
That literally feels like a do or die moment in society and for our, yeah. Excellent. So someone asked you to say that thing again, Asia.
Oh, what thing?
I bet it was the thing about we have one problem.
Oh, yeah. Just that, you know, I think about this all the time. I do. I think about this all the time, because I'm like, what is the thing that would solve everything? Because it's like, I'm like, racism, right? Like racism, big problem. Sexism, big problem. Homophobia, big problem. Poverty, it's a big problem, right? And it's like, I feel like in the past, our way of addressing this problem is to chip away at each one of these things as if they're separate things. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is if we instead think about it as the truth, right? As really just like outgrowths of one problem, which is that we're separate, that we think that there is such thing as the other, as somebody else that is not me, has nothing to do with myself, then everything changes, right? Because I'm not going to treat Molly like differently because like I love her than the stranger down the street, right? Because I know that actually we're the same, like we're one, like we're connected, we're part of the same body. Like I want her to win as much as I want the guy down the street to win.
Imagine if we stopped thinking about like, gosh, what do we have to do to solve like racism or homophobia or sexism, all that stuff? And what if we just said, we're going to make it our mission to uplift every human being?
Yeah. Have everybody win.
That would solve all those things, right? Like if we just made it our mission to say, hey, we're going to live, everything we do, every law we make, every, you know, norm in our society is going to be shaped around how can we uplift every human being? Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have to really worry about those things because they would not exist anymore, right? or an imperfect scenario. But yeah, that's why I have hope, because it's like focusing on the things that we can do versus the things that we've historically been really, really bad at, even understanding, let alone solving.
And you know what? It's interesting, like this, what's coming to me like through this conversation is that we think that like racism or sexism or all the other kind of like isms that like are perpetuated and we perpetrate on each other only happens like outside, right? Like inside my house, like everything's fine, right? But like outside my house, like, oh, like I'm not gonna give that Black person a job, or oh, that woman doesn't deserve to be, you know, promoted or whatever. Yeah. But I bet, I'm actually like 99% sure that like you could find those same exact like issues manifested in a different way, like within your own house and within your own being.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right? And it's like, so maybe this is not as difficult as we think, right? Like I think it's like, it's a twofold thing. It's like, how am I hating myself? Just like you said, right? Like someone who hates is someone who really hates themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think once we recognize we all have kind of these inherent biases that we must overcome, it's easier to understand how other people have like these really illogical biases, and also how to kind of like defeat that kind of way of thinking. We all got a lot of work to do, right? Like, you know, white people, we have done a really awful job of taking care of humanity in a lot of ways, or being a good partner to humanity in a lot of ways. So we must do better. And I do think that white supremacy is about power, and whoever holds that power currently, which is typically white men, must do a much better job of sharing that.
No, that's a really good question, because I think just overall, just like a very like just general observation is that like there's not as many white men on the court here, right? And so what would you say, like one, like how can we get more white men involved? And what would you say to white men who are involved? And what do you think is stopping white men from being involved? You know, so that's a big question.
Yeah.
Fear, and being afraid, I think, were the answers to all your questions.
Yeah, exactly. Do a 3 for 1.
White men are afraid of being shamed. White men are afraid of losing power. White men are afraid of having, you know, a reckoning for what they've done historically. And I think white men are afraid of feeling like they don't know the answers to how to fix this too, right?
Everybody goes to white men, like
you forget, like this is not just like, you know, white men have like been like held the balance of power just recently. This is like forever, right? Like we've kind of pushed down everybody else so that we could kind of hoard this power. So this is not going to change easily. But I think if white men are the strong men that they think that they are, that they will be strong enough to be vulnerable in this situation and admit and not double down, and say, what do we need to do to fix this, and work to fix it. Because that's really the only thing that's going to move anybody forward. You know, because like this ruse of like, hey, you know, white men have had power, people have figured that out, and it's not like something that people are okay with anymore. So
right.
You're not going to be, you know, I think white men would be very, very smart if they said, okay, we get it. What do we need to do better?
And some are. I will say that we've had some incredible folks reaching out and really
not to overgeneralize.
And just and not enough, to be fair. But I think that it is interesting to see that kind of reframing of masculinity and strength as taking a seat and asking questions, and vulnerability. So I think it's possible. It is possible. And it does not have to be hard. It does
masculinity in the way of like this romantic masculinity is kind of ugly to me. It seems very like brutish and not very smart and not very like strong, to be honest with you. Right? If men really believe in strength, the power to be kind is strength. It's not weakness.
And that's something that like we talk about a lot, right? Like there's this idea of power, right, that white men have held. And I always question, like, is it true power, right?
No, it's control.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a distinction. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what is that, right? Like, do you want power? Do you want control? And control, I think, is fleeting, right? Control is
Can be taken away.
oh, it can be taken away, and it's also, it's weak, right? It's like grasping. I don't even know.
It's maintaining control, because you know that if you lose it, you are less than, or you would feel less than, or that it would be used to control you. And that's a fear, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a question. Someone
Sure.
said, how do you reach out to white men? White men will say, but I'm not a bad guy. And how do we reach out to them when they feel vilified?
White men are very fragile, or just men, I would say, are kind of fragile in terms of being pointed out that maybe they've done something wrong, or that they're not as strong as they are. So it's tough. I would say, you should probably know that person. If you do know that person, not shaming them is probably a good way to start. But with the frame of mind of holding them accountable if they've done something completely wrong, and being able to call them out on it. You shouldn't be afraid of that. But like, if we're just talking about like somebody who, it's hard to say because everybody's different, but let me kind of just generalize here.
Yeah.
Since we've been generalizing about men in general anyway. I would say, guys like to feel as though they are contributing, that they have some agency. So shame doesn't work because it causes them to really kind of double down, dig their heels in, most men anyway. I would say you have to kind of like listen to them. Guys like to talk, and the more that they talk, the more they give away clues about what is really going on. So you use what they think are their strengths as their disadvantages, right? So you can understand a lot about a guy by what he doesn't say also. And I would pay attention to those types of things. And that may give you some ideas of how to, start a conversation about something that's important that you want to change. Yeah, it's hard. Everybody's different. I mean, I don't like this, people come to me and like, how do I intervene with the white supremacists? I'm like, I don't know. It depends on that person, right? They could be smart and there's one way to kind of like intervene, or they could be dealing with something else and it could be another way. I would say get to really understand that individual as much as possible, and that will give you the clues: man, woman, rich, poor, whatever.
Sounds like familiar advice.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't have to be hard.
So like when you're intervening, like, right, when you have all these these people that you're talking to, like, what is the place from which you're coming from that allows you to like fully listen, right, and understand them?
Well, I mean, part of it is I was there at one point in my life in their shoes, and I'm very grateful that somebody listened to me. I also have conditioned myself to be able to see the child and not the monster, whether that person is 16 or 60. I know that oftentimes people are putting these suits of hate on, like suits of armor, to protect themselves from something. So I'm trying to understand what it is that they think they're protecting themselves from, or what it really is that they're protecting themselves from versus what they think they're protecting themselves from. And I do a whole lot of listening. I do a lot of listening, and I ask a lot of leading questions to really kind of get the motivations, because my only goal is to understand the motivations of why they got there, because that gives me the clues of what I need to do to bring them back.
Yeah, there was a question about potholes, and it was earlier up, so I'm going to paraphrase it wrong probably, but it was, if there are people who seem like they don't have potholes, do they just have hidden potholes, or there's been maybe a little filled in? Or
we all have potholes, every single one of us. Everybody, if they don't have potholes, they're lying. Some of them, some people have a lot of them and they're like, deep, shallow and deep, and some of them have like one and it's super deep. Like, everybody's different, but we all have potholes. The thing is, some of us are really good at lying about them and covering them up. If somebody won't tell you their potholes, I mean, that's a different story. Some people are very protective, but just the act of trying to understand their potholes can bring people together, because it'll cause you to have intimate conversations about things that maybe will take you away from those really aggressive conversations. The exploration of potholes is always really fascinating for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, you're getting a lot of thumbs up and hearts and
see the child, not the monster.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has.
It's hard. It is the hardest thing to do, to see the child and not the monster, but it's essential. You have to, most of the things that we do, and I think that there was, a really influential book, but like, everything you learned in like kindergarten or first grade or whatever that book was. I really do think it's true. So much of what we carry throughout life was either developed, like in our youth as we were kind of like coming into this developmental stuff and trying to understand life, or we were stunted in some way. I really do think that we need to understand more about like that part of our early journey to figure out like why later on in life we've done certain things. So I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, so good. Someone says, ooh, goosebumps. Amazing. So somebody asked if there was a place to submit questions. This is the place, This is the place to submit questions. This is a live conversation. We're going to be here for a little over 10 more minutes. So go ahead and put in your questions. We may not get to all of them simply because there's a lot happening here.
And I would say too, some people may not be comfortable asking questions in a forum like this. They can always email them. You can go to my organization's website, freeradicals.org.
What a good
Free
segue.
Radicals Project. And email me there. I'm happy to answer any kind of private questions here too as well.
I also want to just make sure, even though we've given all kinds of homework in your work, so you said, a guy with a shaved head came up to you in the alley. Is that where we find white nationalists, white supremacists today? They have shaved heads and they're easy to identify just out on the streets?
Rarely. Rarely anymore these days. No, they look like our kids. They look like our sons, our daughters, our dentists, our mechanics, our teachers. Unfortunately, they don't look like they used to, where they were easy to spot. Now they look like everyday people, and they are in everyday places because the virus has spread. Right? It has moved away from those dark alleyways and those meetings in people's basements to the internet, and it's gotten access to into our homes and our families, and our uncles and our cousins and our children and our coworkers have all become partly infected by this. So unfortunately, it is not easy to spot anymore, and that makes it very difficult.
Yeah, I always want to make sure that someone wrote boots to suits. They've done their homework. Good job.
Yes, it is definitely over the last 30 years moved from boots to suits, which I talk about in my new book.
Yeah. So I want to hear about the books, and I want to hear about Free Radicals, because you said people can reach out to you. Tell us more. This is such, and we talk about this all the time, right? This is it's really incredible work. And what I get excited about is the possibility to scale it and have for every person who is recruited via video game or dark alley or wherever, they're also hearing from Free Radicals and knowing that there's another side and another community. So,
now you're speaking my language. That's what keeps me up at night, is how do we scale, this work of the Free Radicals Project? Because it has really been just me for the most part for many years doing this kind of work. There are other people doing it, but and it can be scaled, right? I mentioned earlier, this is the work of resilience building. This is not, some kind of specialty rocket science. This is the work of making people whole who feel, in most cases, really, really broken, and are taking that brokenness out on other people. So we're at a really critical moment with Free Radicals Project right now, where we must scale or we will essentially die. Because the workload will become so much, and it is already starting to get that, to where we will have to err on the side of caution of not being overwhelmed and hurting people in the process of doing this work and having to shut down. And that's the last thing I want to do. So we're in the process of kind of envisioning what a scaling out would look like. And that would mean, how do we interface with psychologists and school counselors and teachers and all kinds of stuff to share the knowledge that we have? How do we, in some cases, maybe even train them to do intervention work? How do we build this global network of providers, resilience providers, so that if somebody has a problem, they can call a hotline just like they could if they were dealing with suicide issues or depression, and get instant help for somebody in their community, somebody who's trained on doing this. So, I mean, I could really use everybody who's watching help to do this as we're trying to scale and build this. For anybody who's interested in helping Free Radicals Project, we are actually looking for people to contribute to that way of how we scale and how we grow. So we're looking for really smart, talented people who maybe have never thought about doing, building a nonprofit in this way, to serve in this way, who might actually be really interested in doing that. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things to know, if you're hearing this and it sounds like something that you want to be a part of, we're going to put a link in this video of a form that they've created so that you can go ahead and fill that out, so we can get an idea of who you are and how you might be able to contribute. Because this group is called White People Doing Something, not white people watching videos and giving thumbs up. That counts too, and thank you. And here's how you take it to the next step. Somebody said we need so many of you. So I have a question for you. Are there more Christians? Are there more people who have found their way out and could speak on this and are wanting to speak on this? Do those folks exist too?
Absolutely. Well, I've helped over 300, I think close to 400 people leave these groups over the last 15 or 20 years. And my goal is always that they must pay it forward, that they must then go and find somebody to help, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, I have a lot of people who are literally dying to do this work because, they want to do it because it helped them. But they, are stuck maybe working a bar job or, with no job right now and have to be trained to do this work. Because obviously it's very sensitive work where you're dealing with people's lives. But yes, I have a whole list of people that at some point I would love to hire, I would love to train, and I would love to set out onto the world to do this work. There are hundreds of people. And if you think that I've been able to help people, just wait until we can build the infrastructure to enable and empower all these people to go out there. You will see magic happen. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Magic. I love it.
And you're not just removing the white supremacy, right? Like you are making people whole and complete. And
we're empowering them to go out and do better things in the future, not just stop, not just trying to change where they are now, but equipping them to make better people out of them in the future so that they can go help and make better people, that they touch. So it is really about kind of paying it forward and empowering them to continue that good work.
It's amazing. Somebody asked if they are allowed to help with money. No one is ever going to tell you that your money won't help. Yeah, so Asher just posted a link there, freeradicals.org. Of course you can help with money. Please, absolutely. I think that it's always, you can always do that. You will never meet a founder of a nonprofit, I can tell you, having been one for 20 years, who says, oh no, thank you, we're good.
I'm a terrible fundraiser, Molly. I mean, we have a donation link, but it's like the last thing on my mind to ever ask for, because I'm so like buried in the work and making sure. Most people don't know this too, and I should say it. I have funded this work not by asking people for money, but by all the talks and engagements that I do. Is 100% of that money goes straight into the organization. In fact, more than 100%. I've for 20 years been paying it, kind of out of my pocket to do this work. So donations are very much appreciated. It's unfortunately always like the thing that I've never asked for because I've been so busy doing the work. But yes, if what you can give is money, that's great. Try to not stop there and pass the word on to somebody else to, intervene if you can, do something. But we're looking for people to actually want to be part of this organization, who might be looking for jobs, who might, be out of a job with their nonprofit, who say, I really believe in this work and I'd like to, in the near future, help this organization grow too. So if you're interested in that too, that's, we're really looking for anybody who wants to help.
This is an exciting inflection point, right? In terms of you sort of have the momentum right now, and also absolutely need to do that, to grow. Someone said you need money, hire a fundraiser. Yes.
Check,
Great.
check, check.
Excellent.
If you know somebody, send us a link to that person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, we're going to post a link to a form that Free Radicals has built so that you can, and here's the thing, honestly, just take a look at that form. Take a look at the type of things that they're looking for. I think what I've learned running an organization for so long is people say, oh, I can't really help. You know, I'm just a journalist. It's like, wait, what? You're a journalist? You know, or, oh, I'm an attorney and I don't do that kind of law. Wait, what? You're an attorney? Do you know more? You know, so you never know. And I just also, Christian donated his time to join us here today, which is so awesome.
A lot of people donating their time to do something. So hopefully this is just me paying it forward again. So
yeah, I think
everybody here will find a way to do that.
For sure. If you've gotten anything at all out of this talk today, go ahead and put it in the comments. It's always fun to read. But I can say every time I talk to you, and I've talked to you more lately, every single time, I still feel like there's always just like one take, like, right? Would you say it's hard? You can wake people up who are sleeping, and it's hard to wake people up if they're pretending to be asleep. Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, can you share about your upcoming book?
Yes.
Too?
Okay, well, the book that just came out February 25th is Breaking Hate, Confronting the New Culture of Extremism. And then the book before that, which came out, I think 2 years ago, is my memoir. So if people want to learn more about like my full story, White American Youth is the name of that book. If they want to learn more about the process that I use to help people disengage, which I lay out in like 7 steps, they should read Breaking Hate. So a lot of the questions, you know, how do I talk to this person? How do I intervene? How do I do that? Is all answered in Breaking Hate. And I do that with 7 stories of people that I've worked with. And some of the
White American Youth is so good. I bought it the day I met you. We were on a road trip. We met in Utah on top of a mountain, and we were on a road trip, and I bought it, and it's not always easy to read in the car, especially when you're driving for 14 hours. I read that entire book. And I'm like, Asia. So it is so good. It is so good. So
thank you.
Thank you.
And please leave reviews too. That helps a lot too. If you've read the book, either book, please leave reviews on Amazon or any of those platforms. That always helps. You know, us authors, we don't make any money on our books, but it's always good to let people know that the books exist. So.
Yeah, I feel like it would be very cool as people are trying to build out a curriculum, getting really honest and real about American history. What if you started pulling in some of these books and started sharing? You know, I think it could be really
there are
cool.
a couple that do that. Yeah, I know Yale has used my books in the past. A couple of other universities have done that. And I really do think that Breaking Hate could be its own curriculum. And I'm actually building a curriculum based for the Naval Postgraduate School based on my intervention work. So
amazing. Oh, you're up to such great stuff. You are up to such great stuff. I always get excited.
Thank you. Well, it's awesome to talk to you too.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, and also before you go, somebody said they love that bookcase. And I don't know if you guys have seen the Credibility bookcase. Christian, like this bookcase.
It goes for a while.
Yeah, just to be clear, they said it's a little off subject. I was like, oh, we'll touch on the bookcase. It's amazing, right? The bookcase.
Yeah. So. I made the big, when we moved into this place 8 years ago, I made the big mistake of packing books, all these books into boxes. Don't do that. Split your books up into other boxes with other things.
That's a good idea.
Yes, that moving tips. See, everything.
There you go. You get it all here.
Yeah, exactly. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.